it's been about 8 years since I've left the Israelite movement, and now I'm getting a chance to finally explain the reason why I left. I used to go by the name of Brother Yarashalam, and I used to teach the Israelite identity. And as a teenager, I used to have a lot of questions and was very curious about the Bible and the principles of it and what it teaches. And I just was very inquisitive and wanting to know exactly what it was about. It's something that I had been brought up with, so naturally I would want to know exactly what this Bible was about. So what I remember is when I was about probably around 20, 21 years old, I began like asking even more questions about it, going to church and just trying to find out, some simple answers to simple things that I thought were simple at the time. And I remember I had looked at a specific passage. I had read it. Then I went to a Bible study, and I waited for the pastor to finish the sermon. And at the end, I went up and asked a question about that particular verse to see what his take was on it. And what he gave me was something that was nowhere close to being related to what I had just read. And so that kind of had me scratching my head for a minute because I was just confused on how he got that type of interpretation and explanation out of this particular topic that I'm asking him about. So that was about 2 or 3 months prior to me going into the Marine Corps. So I didn't have that much time to really investigate and go deep in on that question and just ask and get more clarity on like what am I dealing with here with the with the church, the pastors, what's really going on. So I ended up going into the Marine Corps, and when I got to the Marine Corps, I had to put all the religion and all the the type of Christianity and Bible to the back of my mind because I had other priorities at that time that I needed to accomplish and needed to do. So it was a period where I didn't have any type of exposure to any type of religion or any type of Christianity or anything like that. So what ended up happening is after 4 years, I ended up getting medically retired because I almost got killed during the line of duty. And so, after this time, I ended up getting released from the Marine Corps. And as I got into my new place, I remember thinking, like, I got some time on my hands now. And I had not forgot about what happened, before I left to the Marine Corps. And I'm going to go back and investigate this to find out what's really happening and what is this Bible talking about and why is it so much obscurity around stuff and you can't get straight answers and people are running from things and giving interpretations that I don't see there. So I'm like, right now is my time and I'm on it right now. Right? I hadn't forgot. And like I said, the good thing is that I had 4 years without having any type of indoctrination from anything. So I had a relatively clean slate to work with. And I understood that at that time. Like, okay, I'm getting ready to go through the book again, read and get my own understanding from it and see what I come out with and without having someone forcing something down my throat. Right, and telling me what it is. So I started reading Genesis, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You start going through it. I started going through the books. And one of the themes that I noticed was that I kept seeing God and Israel. God and Israel, the Lord God of Israel. All these, I kept seeing this type of theme that this thing is surrounded around this people or this group called Israel. And I had never heard of these people before because when I was doing from what I can remember, it's always, we were always dealing with New Testament type stuff, and the Old Testament was something that we really didn't touch on. So I wasn't familiar with who this group was. And so what I did was I started to think like, okay, if this book is saying God and Israel, one of two things. One, this thing doesn't have anything to do with me because I'm not Israel and I don't know who Israel is. And then two is like, okay, well, maybe I don't know who they are, but let me see if I can find out who these people are. This is what this book is talking about. Who are these people? And so what I did, got on there, simple YouTube searches, and started just looking around and finding out what I can find on it. I ran into a few Christian videos. I was already comfortable with Christianity at the time, so that's what I'm going to go to, obviously. And I click on videos with Christians talking about it, and it was for the most part quite vague. I didn't really know. It almost make it seem like it's some mystical affair. The children of Israel, these were God's people, and all something it didn't give me a clear answer on it, at least from what I found at that time. So what I did was I ended up finding another video. It was like on the streets with it was a Christian preacher, and it was with some people calling themselves Hebrew Israelites. And in the video, it's kind of having some type of like back and forth, almost like it was a confusing situation in there, and I didn't get much out of it. But I did pick up on the name like Hebrew Israelite, and I thought to myself like, okay, who are these people? I've never seen these people before. It looked a bit different to me. And it just was something I was unfamiliar with. And I didn't think too much of it at that time. But you know how YouTube has a recommended videos on the side. And it had some other videos that were talking about, that came up at the time. And it said something about Israelites and Hebrew Israelites. So I said, okay, I'm curious. Let me go and see what this is about. Click on the video. And then what I saw was something that absolutely amazed me. Something that I had never seen in my life and was not expecting to see. They start talking about how these Israels and Israelites and Jews, these are the real identity of the black folks, and how the Jews had, the European Jews had taken the identity of the black folks, and that this is the identity that the world is kind of hiding from these people who went in slavery and who are in these conditions. And I'm like, okay, what is this about, man? I'm like, let me hear some more. So, I keep listening to more videos, and I start seeing stuff about them going into the Deuteronomy, going into the curses. And I'm like, ooh, here we go. Now we're on some stuff. It started lining up, the Deuteronomy 28, if you're familiar with that. All the stuff going into slavery. I'm like, this matches up, right? This matches up. This has to be it right here. Give me more, right? Give me more. I'm hooked at that time. So one video turns into 2 videos. 2 videos turns into 4 videos. 4 videos into 30. And after 3 months, I had went through the entire video library of anything that had anything to do with Israelites, right? Because on it, I was on it day and night. Waking up, I'm on it. I'm listening to videos. Going to sleep, I'm listening to videos. For a full 3 months straight, I had went through all of the library. And at that point, I had started keeping the Sabbath, right? I'm getting completely immersed into the Israelite doctrine. Right? This is something that I have a strong conviction for at this time. Super strong. You can't tell me anything. This is the truth. This is it. And I don't want to hear nothing else because y'all been hiding this from us. You know how it goes. The same type of stuff. It's like it was a very strong conviction. And like I said, I started keeping the Sabbath, fringes, got rid of the pork. Started keeping the laws. I'm like, okay, so this is the reason why we're in this predicament. I'm going to do exactly what this thing is saying and what I'm supposed to do because I don't want to be in the wrath of God. So I'm going to follow the instructions. And so I did. And after about, I say about 5-6 months in, I was already involved with a camp. And the camp they lived, or where the camp was at, it was about 4 hours from where I stayed at. So I used to drive down there every Sabbath. Every Sabbath I'd drive down, and I had finished video school during that time too. So what I did was I used to go down there with the camera and videotape the Sabbath class, and then I would go to camp afterwards and videotape the camp, drive back 4 hours, and then edit the videos and upload them. Right, so I was super serious about this thing. And I had no intentions on being a teacher or anything. I just want to know what's my part and what I can do to help get it out, help get this what I thought was the truth out. So I even went and got circumcised, right? Paid for the surgery and everything. Like, I need whatever I need to do. Whatever I need to do, I'm about this thing. Right? So editing the videos, uploading it, I'm putting in the work, doing what I'm supposed to do. What I ended up running into were more questions as I began to study more and get more familiar and get really, really immersed in the doctrine and in the study. I started to understand it a lot more, and it became way more clear. When you get to a certain point of understanding of something, then you get to ask questions that further the conversation. So you go from starting out with the Deuteronomy 28 and those type of things, then you start to move, your level of understanding starts to increase your ability to question. And so when I started to question certain things and certain interpretations, just asking questions, because, you don't want to, in my thought, I'm not trying to be a robot. I need to be able to, I'm trying to ask questions in being able to defend the doctrine or being able to defend my position for other people who are going to come asking these particular questions, right? I'm not looking for just a group that it's a truth in. I'm looking to be able to defend it when they're coming with different questions and trying to hit me up with different things. What about this with this? So that's how I'm preparing and approaching it. So I'm asking these type of questions for clarification and seeing what we can. Hold on, can we work this out? What is this all about here? And so when I realize is that even in this particular level of understanding, which I was, surprised to see, was that people will hold on to something once they have taken it and convinced themselves that is the truth right there. No matter what the scriptures come out, there was a certain level that I had reached with certain people that they're just not budging. And I started to see that, okay, they're not budging. They're not budging. So that, to me, that was a problem and a red flag. And so eventually I ended up leaving, and then I began studying and kept going and kept studying. So after about 2 years, that's when I felt confident enough that I can go out and teach. Right? I was able to teach. So I started up a YouTube channel, and then it started to get traction. I started to drop videos, and I felt like I was doing the right thing. At that particular time, I was doing the right thing. But as I said, as you keep growing in knowledge and understanding, the questioning begins to become more complex and more complicated. And then I would have questions about how other things fit into this particular worldview. Like, for example, when you talk about things like science, how does science fit in here? Because science is something that I had no problem with. Because it's something that I use all the time, and everybody using it. We're using it right now for me to convey the message and for you to watch the message. It's something that has proven itself. It's something that we use all the time to make life convenient for humans. So I didn't have a problem with science. I'm just trying to figure out, well, how does it fit into this particular worldview? And then I started questioning things because I had a certain level of understanding about genetics. How does the genetic part fit in here? The genetics say one thing, but then the doctrine says another thing, right? And I started to see that, it was okay to use certain areas of science to when it falls in place with the doctrine, but when it's outside the place of the doctrine, then it would be brushed over, or you can call it like that's the white man's science, or any of those type of things, like to kind of just like smooth over it. So what ended up happening is that I didn't have enough doubt to fully question the Bible. So what I would do is and I eventually realized this later, I would just suppress the questions and kind of keep them in the recesses of my mind and not deal with them. Even though there was information that I knew that was contradictory to what it was that I had believed and come to believe and understand. So I would suppress the questions and it's kind of just, smooth over it, like I said. And what happened is that I had eventually received an email from someone, and they were asking a question about marriage and divorce. And this particular scenario was interesting because it wasn't a scenario that was dealt with specifically in the Bible. It was something that was rather unique because it's a circumstance that would have been rare at that time, but common in today's time. So the writers at that time would not have written about it because it was not something that would have been an issue at that particular time. And so what I did was I grabbed a verse that was vague enough to be applied somehow to this particular situation, and then I began to provide counsel according to that verse, right? And then what happened was the gentleman he took the counsel, but then he ended up replying and giving me further information, which further complicated the scenario. It made it way more complex. And it's like, this is definitely not something that is dealt with in the scriptures. And so what I ended up doing is I wanted to make sure I don't give someone bad advice, because this is usually you can go to the scriptures and find something, but this one you couldn't. So I ended up reaching out to one of my elders at that time, sent him over the email and the discussion, and seeking for his advice to see am I missing something in here? He sent back, he replied and said the counsel was good, right? He said it was on point, and that essentially he agreed with it. And so from there I took that advice, and then I replied to the other gentleman again, and then he went on about his way and I went on about my way, and that's how that one was settled. The next day I went and looked through the discussion again, and I'm analyzing it and I'm looking at it, and what stood out to me was that I was giving a lot of my own personal interpretations and advice on what it is that the gentleman should do. And I came to realize in that very moment that, wow, I had been doing the same exact thing that I had been chastising the Christian church for doing. But the difference is I had been doing it at a much higher level. And it took a longer time for me to realize that I had been doing it just at a much higher level than what the Christian has done, than how the Christian does it. Because the Christian will take a verse and they'll just usually take just a verse and they'll run off and they'll create entire doctrines and churches off of that. The difference is I was doing it was a little bit more complex. Precept upon precept, you're doing all these things. So it took a lot more time for me to catch it. That, wow, I'm really doing this. And I'm rebuking them for doing it, but I'm still the one doing it. It's just at a more advanced level. And immediately I came to an understanding on a question that I had been asking myself for so long. And that question is, why are there so many church groups, Israelite sects? Why are there so many of these sects out there if everybody's reading from the same Bible? Something is not adding up. And in that moment, it had answered that question. And I come to realize that you can make this Bible say whatever you want it to say. Like, wow, man. I can't believe that this is what's like really happening. And I was in a state of kind of like being upset. And I felt like I was almost deceived in some way, because I know that there's people who have been reading this for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And how is it that they have not come to this simple realization when I've come to it after 3 years? Right? And I felt real offended over that. And at this point, I was about halfway into making my next video, and I just couldn't even do it anymore. Right? Everything was done. Like I'm like, I can't finish this video. I cannot release any more videos, because the only reason I was doing the videos because I believed in what it was that I was doing was right. And I believed that this was the real truth. Right? But when I come to this realization, I found out that there's no way I can continue teaching this. And at that time, I was like 15 videos in. I had like 20,000 subscribers, and the channel was hot. It was heating up like crazy. It was just getting super hot. And I said, it didn't matter. That had nothing to do with me, because I didn't come into this and start teaching for fame or fortune. That's not what I was teaching for. I was teaching because I believed that what I was doing was the right thing. So it took nothing for me to drop it and say, you know what, I'm done with this. I don't care if I had 1 million subscribers per day. There's no way I can teach this and go to sleep with myself at nighttime knowing what I know now. Right? So after the disbelief and the letdown, I felt like this super strong, like, sense of liberation. Something I had never felt before. It's almost like breaking out of a prison. Like, I felt like, wow, I finally figured this thing out. Like, I finally got to the bottom of this thing. I finally got to the bottom of this thing. And then from there, I felt so free. Like, okay, now, like, I can start to ask these questions that I've been asking myself and suppressing for the longest time. And now I feel like, okay, you know, maybe I can start getting out here and finding the answer to those questions. Right? This liberation period, it lasted over the period of a few weeks, where I'm just feeling like, man, I'm free. Right? And the scary part about it was, like, you're free, and it's like breaking out of a prison, but breaking out of a prison that I did not know was there. I just happened to stumble upon it like I was in a prison, locked into a certain way of looking at the world and not even knowing it. So like I said, from that point forward, I went into a serious study zone. Like, I went into study mode, student mode, and I became more receptive to other ideas and other ideologies and worldviews to be able to answer many of the questions that I had just regarding life in general. And because I was not confined to just a small area, and I had exposure to the broad library of information, I was able to discover a lot of those answers. And for now, what I'm doing is bringing a lot of that information out to help those people who are on that same particular path. Right? It's not for everyone. It's for people who are on that particular path. Now, everyone's going to be on different paths. There's different paths for different people. And there's not one path that fits all. But for those that are on that particular path, those that are looking to question a lot of the inherited beliefs that may have been passed on to them from parents or whoever it else may be, and there's something that's urging you to look forward and look for more. This is what the information that I'm going to be bringing out is going to be for. It's going to be for that type of person. Now, as far as the Israelites, like, I don't have any personal problem or anything like that with the Israelite community. There's no type of problem like that. In fact, when I look back, it was a very valuable lesson going through that particular doctrine and learning the information I learned in that phase of my life. Right? It helped me out tremendously, get some understanding on a lot of things, and to use certain skill sets that I learned through that experience to further myself throughout the rest of the phase of the life that came afterwards. So I'm appreciative for that, right? And I'll never not be appreciative for that, because I know what things that I've picked up from that experience. It's just that I'm looking for answers to questions that particular doctrine was unable to provide answers to. And although there are a lot of truths in there, it's an overall incomplete truth. And that's why I left the Israelites.